let's talk about moves in general. So on page 6 of the rule book, it explains that movement is how our blocks get from one position to another on the map. So really quickly, remember we talked about position. A position is a line between two endpoints. So this is a position. This block is at this position. This is how we move from position to position. You move your blocks one at a time. Exception, group attacks. But that's going to be talked about later in the attack section. You move your blocks in your action phase. You must make your moves in the following order. We start with withdrawal moves. Then we go to attack moves. Then we go to reinforcement entry moves. And then we go into march moves. These are all 4 separate movements, and you can only do movements within each segment at a time. There's an acronym. They use WARM to make it very easy for you. You can move as many blocks as you want with moves of the same type. You can move your blocks in any order you choose. Once a block completes its move, it cannot move again that action phase. So if you do a withdrawal move or an attack move, because you have to ask for a general order to do either of these, you're not going to be able to do a march move. If you do a withdrawal move, you can't attack. If you do an attack move, you can't withdraw or do march moves. So you're going to have to be very careful on how you choose to move your blocks. You can move all your blocks during withdrawal moves or attack moves, or you could pick a few and do the withdrawal moves, and then the rest could do march moves, as an example. Reinforcement entry moves isn't really a move, but it's how we bring reinforcements onto the map. So as it was explained earlier, a block moves from position to position. We understand what a position is. Crossing one area at a time. Movement distance is counted in steps. It costs 1 step to cross an area, and there is a +1 additional step penalty if there is an obstructed symbol on the position the block is leaving or the position it is entering. The penalty is only if the symbol is inside the area being crossed. If there are obstructed symbols on both sides of the position, the penalty is still only 1. So in this example, this Confederate block sits here on this block. He moves forward. So just to cross from one position to the next position costs 1 movement point. If he's going to cross this position to the next, it's going to cost 2 points. He does not have enough since he just moved from one position to the next. But if this is the start of his next move, if he moves from this position to here, he has to stop because inside the area is an obstructed position, which costs an extra movement point. It costs a movement point to cross, and then the extra one gets absorbed here. Okay, so this video is for Nepedo. He is in my Discord channel, and he helped me out with this particular rule that I made a huge mistake in about movements. So a movement path. A block moves from position to position, crossing one area at a time. Movement distance is counted in steps. It costs 1 step to cross an area. There is a additional step penalty if there's an obstructed symbol on the position the block is leaving or the position is entering. The penalty is only if the symbol is inside the area being crossed. If there are obstructed symbols on both positions, the penalty is still only 1. I thought you get an additional penalty for both positions you enter. I was wrong. My apologies. So, if this block wants to go to here, all right, it is 1 step to move through the area itself. No matter where you're at, it always costs you 1. And since this is a double obstructed position on both sides, it will cost an additional step. So since blocks normally have 2 steps, there you go. He can cross from one to the other. Thank you, Nepedo. You can choose a block's front and rear at the end of its move. There is no movement cost to change the front. A block that doesn't move in a turn can still change the front. You can change it while performing your march moves. A block that cannot march move out of a position can still change its front in that position. At the end of your action phase, any of your blocks in the same position together must have the same front and rear. So you can't have one guy facing one way and then the rest of them facing him on the other side. A Union block can never move into a position that bounds a Confederate entry area. No such restriction applies to the Confederate blocks and Union entry areas. We talked about these entry points. They have these red lines. Never can a blue block ever sit bound from these areas for the Confederates. So now let's go ahead and talk about partial areas and positions. So obviously the game board is a square, so it doesn't cover every single segment of the area of Gettysburg properly. So you have some edges that are partial areas and positions. As I'm reading from the book, a partial area is one not completely bounded by positions, or a partial position is one without two endpoints. Blocks can occupy partial positions and can move across partial areas. So this is a partial area. If you take a look, it has an endpoint, but it doesn't have a second endpoint. But you can see the line is touching right here. And since that line is there, this is still a legal move. You can march like this. I can go 1, right to this guy, and 2. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's a partial area movement. Very simple, very clean. A block can exit the map from partial areas and, in a later turn, re-enter the map. Exiting can only be done by march or withdrawal moves. Re-entry can only be done by march move. When a block exits, leave it off the map next to the area where it exited. Re-entry must be through that same area, though not necessarily to the original position. It costs 1 movement step to exit or re-enter, plus any obstructed penalty. March move restrictions regarding distance, enemy fields of fire, and enemy blocks apply and can prevent exit or re-entry. In my example right here, the block is on a partial area, and he can exit the map. And he can exit the map off here, but he has to stay in this area. He cannot leave, so you probably want to put him here just to show that he's off the map. But he can come on, but he'd have to come on a march move on the next turn. And he can go into any position he wants in this particular area. Now, it's kind of easy with the red re-entry point, but this could be the same over here or over here. Anywhere on the board at all. So you can leave. It costs the move. They'll leave the area, and then they have to stay there, and they can come back later. But also remember that if blue happens to position himself here, this can still affect your re-entry. Alright, so next we're going to talk about multiple blocks, friendly or enemy, in a position. I'm going to do this slowly and one step at a time so you can understand this. You cannot end a move with more than 3 of your blocks in a single position. Any number of blocks can move through a position. So, in this example right here, I have 3 Confederate blocks in that position. You cannot end up with more than 3. That would be illegal. It looks cool, but it's illegal. However, any number of blocks can go through the position. So I can go 1 and 2 and end up right here perfectly fine. Because this is also a separate position. As you can see, the endpoint's here and then the endpoint here. Even on these open areas, these are separate positions. Remember that. So I could put 3 here, no problem, no sweat. I can also move this guy through, and he can just move right in. Beautiful. A block can enter a position occupied by an enemy block only in attack moves. So remember that. If you're not on attack moves, you just can't walk up to somebody and go through their position. If a block crossed the enemy front area, it is placed in front of the enemy block on the opposite side of the position. So what does that mean? So if I were to move forward and through, I cannot just go through if I'm on attack moves. I would have to end right here. Because now they're going to face off. So far up to this point, I've taught you about fields of fire and basically setting up for artillery. But if you were to move and cross the front area of a block, you can't just cross it willy-nilly. You just can't go boom, boom, because you're in a fight. So you will have to face him right here in a close combat. If it crossed the enemy's rear area, it is placed behind the enemy block on the same side of the position as the enemy. He cannot just pass through even if he wanted to. It's the rear area of the blue block, right? But no, he's actually going to fight him here, and this is a serious negative modifier too. Rear blocks and rear attacks, that's not good. A block in the same position as an enemy block cannot leave to its rear if the enemy block is behind it, and cannot leave to its front if the enemy block is in front of it. A block can never pass through an enemy block. So if you ever find yourself in this situation as blue, and this guy moves through, he is now permanently stuck. And most likely, if he loses, you're probably going to see him get destroyed, just by withdrawal issues itself. Enemy blocks do not count against the 3-block limit for friendly blocks. If you have multiple friendly blocks in the same position at the start of your action phase and you don't want your opponent to know which is which, you can pick them up, shuffle them out of sight, and then put them back. In other words, if maybe I have a mix of core or commands here, different named units, I don't want to know, I can shuffle them and put them back as long as they go back into this area. He may know which one's which by the last fight that you had. He might know that this might be Anderson, so you can switch them at your leisure and then put them back as you see fit.